Invoice automation is a huge topic in the AP and P2P community in 2022 and will be for the next few years. In this very special CEO session, we're going to talk about invoice automation, innovation, misconceptions about invoice automation, and the ability to read email in an invoice automation model. Make sure you stick around until the end when our experts share tips for a successful automation project. And maybe we could start with Anand. Perhaps you could tell us what you see as the biggest innovation in the last few years impacting invoice automation.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Mary. If I go back to the innovation that is happening, what comes to mind, obviously, is artificial intelligence. And I say that it's not just with invoice automation. It is revolutionizing the entire business landscape, entire things, how we do work, how we drive cars, how we buy things. And invoice automation has been impacted exactly the same way like every other industry has been with artificial intelligence. And I feel there is also a lot of misconception around artificial intelligence because people haven't seen it, though they have used it in different areas of how they buy things, how they use things. But when I come to invoice automation and I look at artificial intelligence, we have been bombarded with a lot of AI, as companies call it, in their applications, in the invoice automation applications that are out there. Legacy applications that have been around for decades now suddenly call themselves AI. And it has, for that reason, provided a different or a misconception to users on what AI really means. AI doesn't mean that you get a new set of fancy charts, predictions, which could be right, which could be wrong. That's not AI. AI is when a machine can do a job as good or better than a human, right? So that's about AI. And when you have AI doing actually the job very much better than any person can, that is true AI. And that invoice impacts your how you process your invoices, how you can process your invoices automatically. We're talking about real invoice automation that is ground up using AI.
I was kind of laughing when I was listening to you talk because I think one of the first applications that I was aware of with AI was on Amazon and the recommendation system that they use after you purchase something, and how I laugh when I see some of the recommendations that they come in. It's not perfect.
Yeah, so most of the AIs has been invented in the consumer space. It's all about making you buy the stuff that you probably don't need, but would love to buy, right? Or spend more time on applications or spend more time watching Netflix because there's a great recommendation engine out there which tells you, hey, these are the other shows that you could actually watch. So the technology has its roots, the real AI technology has its roots in consumer applications because that's where the most money is to be made, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But it has found its way into enterprise and into how finance applications work. But when it comes to finance and enterprise, it's all about getting the real deal. Are you saving money? Are you making me compliant? Are you making me more efficient? Can I do things faster? So unless AI can produce all that stuff, it is not real AI. So AI has moved from the consumer space, the technology that was invented out there, and technology is very clear. It's about giving machines eyes, so we call it computer vision. It's about giving machines the ability to speak or understand language. We call it NLP, natural language processing. And the behaviors and the understanding, we call it machine learning, right? To understand based on the data and get the expertise of that domain, right? So these are like basic building blocks of AI, but applying it to invoice automation so that they produce the outcomes that finance and AP teams really care about is the critical part, which is where I think the innovation has really happened.
All right, Jamie, not to put any pressure on, but can you top that?
No, look, I mean, what's lovely is, I think hearing from an expert, somebody that's been there, done it, and obviously is in that industry. You and I, Mary, we work with the users, we work with the community, so we know what the reality is, of these systems and what users use. So what Anand started with was really that many organizations, sort of maybe miscommunicate what AI is all about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the issue there is that users get then brought into they don't quite understand, and they might be buying product or solutions that aren't really sufficient or fit for purpose. So that's the first challenge. But again, if I look from the community point of view, in terms of the last couple of years, which I think was the question, Mary, which, innovation in the last few years, which has impacted invoice automation, I think it's user adoption, to be honest. I think the fear of going down that route of invoice automation is starting to lesser, because we've gone through this working from home and different environments. I think people for the first time are really seeing the real value, and that's from C-suite level right through to user level. So I think there's more of a user adoption. I think people are excited about the product, but I do agree with Anand's point that you've really got to look at the products. You've got to look at the solutions. You've got to look at what's right for an organization. It isn't a one size fits all for everybody. It might not be AI. It might be invoice automation or RPA. There might be lots of different solutions that might be relevant for organizations, but it must be sold in the right way by the right type of organization.
And, one of the things we don't hear anymore, which I think is a good thing, when we first started talking about this, people, especially when we were talking about bots, it was like people thought there was going to be a robot sitting in the cubicle next to them. And I think we've gotten past that. So I'm using that kind of to segue into talking a little bit about, which we've already done, some of the biggest misconceptions. And I'm pleased to say, I think anyway, that we've gotten away from thinking at least that there would be robots in the office. Of course, when we're talking about robots in the office, it's when we were all in the office, and now we're not there anymore. So you want to talk a little bit more about misconceptions, Anand?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to kind of piggyback on what Jamie just said about what happened in the last 2 years. One of the things that I used to see with customers and talking to CFOs, AP managers, they're always under pressure to reduce cost and make it efficient. And one easy way out was to outsource it. Let somebody else do it. Let's take care of the labor arbitrage and get things out there. That entire process has been disrupted. And what I mean by that is, and during the pandemic, when everybody was working from home, there were huge delays in processing invoices, right? Processing any kind of transactions that were outsourced. People couldn't come to work, there were disruptions. And as Jamie alluded to, that led to a massive digital transformation initiatives from companies. Companies wanted to automate those functions. So you converted from paper to cloud applications. How can I get out of my desktop scanner and ask my suppliers to send invoices in? All those things happened. But really, the true transformation, as I thought, was when some of the CFOs started thinking about, hey, since we are doing this transformation, since we are moving from one system to another, right? Is this an opportunity to really relook at what this process could mean? Is it the same thing from going from one rule-based system, a desktop system that we had, to a cloud-based system? Yeah, it's going to be better. We are going to be not connected to the same desktop. We can work from anywhere. But
Right.
is it the right thing to do right now, or should I take care of the technology that is out there and try to do something different, which will make this process future-proof for the next couple of years? Right. And that actually led to this massive investment that I saw, and massive number of companies that I saw using AI. And I was at a conference last week, the Gartner CFO conference. Gartner, as you know, is a big name in telling CFOs about the trends, industry about the trends and what's happening, right? And what I saw them talking about is, hey, CFOs, they had probably a couple of hundred, if not 1,000 CFOs in the room, right? Take the next step on using AI to get to autonomous. Now, I had not seen a lot of analysts or consultants talking about autonomous, right? And I'll get to that, how autonomous is different, or what does it mean? But really, it is grounded in AI, grounded in next set of transformation, where you want to make sure that you are leapfrogging, not going from an incremental gain in your invoice automation system, but leapfrogging into something that is really differentiate you and set you up for being competitive in the next decade or so. So maybe I went on a tangent a little bit on Jamie's question, but I thought it was important that your folks would understand.
It makes it a little bit more interesting. These were just some rough guidelines.
Okay.
Jamie, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, look, I mean, again, it's some excellent points, and it's lovely to hear somebody who's an industry expert. But again, if you're looking at the biggest misconceptions that we encounter, I think it's both sides, Mary. I think there's a misconception from a user point of view that the adoption or how the system will be used could be too difficult. So the misconception there is, oh, well, it's maybe we don't want change. We'll push back a little bit, and it's going to be far too difficult to train, etc., etc. And that's a misconception, because actually a lot of these solutions aren't as difficult as people make out.
Right.
That's number one. And then from a sales perspective, from a solutions perspective, it's what I mentioned earlier. It's about what they're selling and what the desire and need is from the organization. Sometimes that misconception can be there as well. So I think it's both sides, a little bit of the user and a little bit of the sales solution side. That can be a challenge.
Yep.
Yeah, I think on that misconception specifically, right? I think the accounts payable managers, the people who buy products, have been burnt a lot in the last so many decades. This is not a new problem that we are talking about, and they have gone through buying cycles, being promised that, hey, this is going to solve. This is the pill that you're looking for, magic pill that you're looking for, right? And they have been burnt so many times, right? So I can obviously understand where the resistance is coming from, but at the end of the day, you're looking at, does this product really solve what I'm looking for the outcomes, right? And does it create the least amount of friction in my business? Is it easy to implement? And most importantly, is it going to work for me, right? Because it's my business is unique, my invoices are unique, my way of matching accounting are all unique, and you can show me a fancy demo that everything works fine, but is it really going to work on my data? So unless you are really grounded on that, on the outcomes, and being able to verify it on your own process and see the outcomes, there is nothing that is ever going to solve it, right? So you got to be oriented on that. Otherwise, you're going to face these problems all along and get burnt with even more set of applications, right? And that has created that resistance. It's not that I don't think the finance teams are really against any kind of automation. In fact, they are the change agents in the companies that I see. They are the one who are bringing in more and more transformation. But just having been had such bad experiences, especially in invoice automation, has made them reluctant to go out and try new technologies.
Yep. All righty. So, we're talking about invoice automation, but we're also starting to hear, a lot of different terminology. So some people call it invoice automation, some people call it AP automation, some people call it P2P automation, and there are differences. And maybe you could talk about that. And do you think the marketplace understands the differences and sees it?
Sure, I can go with that. It's a very interesting question, Mary, because I think it is something that the market has created, the companies have created. I'll tell you my view on it, right? Uh, in the finance teams, there are different, obviously, processes. There is order to cash process. And when we talk about order to cash process, it is the time when customer orders a product, to you build it, you ship it, and or you provide that service, and then you invoice it, right? Now, traditionally, that has been an order management function. The finance team actually comes in when you have the invoice ready, right? When you send the invoice out to the customer, and then you follow up with them, make sure it's paid on time. Similarly, on the AP side, it's called procurement process, where you have procurement experts who are dealing with signing contracts with their vendors so that they are optimized on the pricing. They have supply chains to take care of, right? And make sure that they get the right product at the right time, so that they can build what the customer needs. But then the finance portion actually happens when the vendor sends you the bill, sends you the invoice, right? And that invoice is the one which you're supposed to make sure that it is accurate. It has all the line items, pricing that you ordered for, and then paid, right? And the finance process is the process that the invoice process that we really care about. Finance teams care about. Why? Because you want to make sure that the right controls are built in. You want to make sure that if my procurement team, bought this product, am I matching to the right PO? Am I receiving it or not, right? But at the end of the day, the finance team is also worried about making sure that, hey, how do I categorize it? How do I account for it? Which department do I get it into, right? Do I route it to the right person for approval? Do I make sure that this accounting for this is deferred over the right period, right? And those are really finance tasks. Is there a duplicate payment that is happening, right? Is there fraud happening? So those are all finance tasks. But what we are being kind of taught in the market today is actually, if you fix procurement upfront, all these things are taken care of, right? So problem which the CFO wants to solve is, how do I make sure that my invoice, when I say my AP invoice to pay process, is automated, That's the problem I really want to solve. I want to make sure that the invoices are processed in the least amount of time. My invoices are not fraudulent. There are no duplicates. They're accounted correctly. I don't, impact my end users. How do I take care of that? And what we have been sold is to order to take care of that, you got to fix the procurement, right? So the P2P is really a overarching process, not really a finance process. I would say it is a procurement process. It stops at invoicing when the vendor invoices you, and from invoicing, receiving the vendor's invoice, all to the payments is the finance process. So I kind of call it, from a finance point of view, a spend to pay process, because you could spend any way you want. Any kind of money that leaves the company is an accounts payable function. It might be something that you bought through procurement, or it might be rent bills that you're paying. It might be expenses that you're reimbursing. These are all money that is leaving the door, which is a part of the finance function, right? So I think about this category. What really finance or accounts payable team should care about is the spend to pay process. The procurement, leave it to the experts. They care about procurement, about purchase orders, about pricing, about supply chains. That's not your domain. You should care about, how do I process an invoice in the least amount of time with the least amount of impact to my end users? How do I make sure that my controls are 10 times as better than they are today? How do I make sure my accounting is accurate? How do I make sure that my pricing duplicates are all taken care of, right? And if you can do that with the least amount of cost, effort, time, right, you got a winner in your accounts payable team.
So, Jamie, do you think that the accounts payable folks understand the difference?
Do you know what? I think, by the way, you can tell that, and when it's, you can tell the passion's coming out in Anand. So we could go on all day with this one. I love it, but I don't think we fundamentally understand the difference. And I'll tell you the reason why is because, again, marketing teams confuse people with different terminology: source to pay, P2P, procure to pay, purchase to pay, source to pay. All of this terminology comes out, and I do agree, Anand, that if you're looking at the heart of what accounts payable is about, it's a particular part of that process. But actually, what we need to do as AP professionals, we need to understand the end-to-end process and the end-to-end solutions. So far too often, AP folk do a very good job at transacting, making payments, dealing with supply queries, and all the good things that they do. And they assume their system that they've been sold as a P2P solution solves all the issues, and clearly it doesn't. So I think it's marketing which is the challenge that's been brought about. But actually, do I think that we should learn more? I do, absolutely. I think we should be understanding the end-to-end process. And again, from a point of view that you and I, Mary, have spoken many a time, that can we control the front end and the back end of the process? We can't. We can influence them, and we can try and guide and train. We control the middle bit, or towards the end of the process. But guess what? We do get the blame an awful lot for a lot of the things that go wrong. And that's the challenge. And Mary, and I know that our users, our community, they're the hardest working people in all of finance. They really are. And sometimes the misconception around the solutions and what the terminology is, yes, we've got to educate ourselves, but actually, sometimes you've got to go back to basics, haven't you? You've got to look, okay, what's the fundamentals of what we do? What can the system part do for us? And then it comes down to training and education, making sure the requisition functions know what they're doing, what the procurement teams know what they're doing, the treasurers know what they're doing in terms of cash management, and then, the supplier onboarding process. There's an awful lot to this, which is, component parts. But I agree with Anand that in the accounts payable world, we deal with a small section of this end-to-end solution, but we're not off the hook. We should understand it. That's my view of the world.
No, absolutely.
That's why I always tell people to make sure you understand what you're buying. Don't assume that what company A is offering is the same as company B, especially if company B's is a lot less, costs a lot less. There's usually a reason for that.
Yeah.
Do you run into that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a cost of automation, right? Like Jamie, so there's a cost associated with this, and that ROI we all been led to believe, which is true, that has to be a very positive ROI for any investments that finance or any team makes, right? But I absolutely agree, Jamie, that we got to understand as AP professionals the end-to-end process, from the time an employee requests something or from the time you onboard a supplier, what really happens, right? But more often than not, I see initiatives right, that are being put in to solve the AP problem, right? The blame, as you said, falls on AP, that they want to solve the AP problem, and instead of solving the AP problem and focusing on that, it becomes a multi-year project because you're trying to solve everything in the front end, right? Which is right from onboarding a supplier, putting a risk management system, a supplier portal, EDI, whatever you name it, right? And requisition system, catalog system, and creating huge amount of supplier friction, and it becomes a multi-year project, right? To get these things in place. And when you put multi-year projects, I come back to that misconception because, hey, at the end of the day, at the end of those 3 years, I thought this was going to be smooth, like this, everything is going to work, and it doesn't work, right? So what I meant to say was, as AP folks, right, if you just focus on my problem, right, I'm not really worried about how you optimize your procurement. I would love that you optimize your procurement because at the end of the day, that would help the company. But if I want to solve this problem, let me focus on this problem. How do I get it done faster, cheaper, and see the ROI quickly, right? So let me focus on how do I process my accounts payable invoices. If it means that I have to spend a year trying to convince everyone to send my invoices electronically, right? I will go down that path. That's the thing you want me to do. In the meantime, this still has to be solved. I should have a way of solving it the way the invoices are coming in today through my email or whatever the form it may be, right? So that's what I meant by I want to make sure that the AP folks are successful and they're not drawn into this huge IT projects, and they're not sold by marketing into buying something big, a multi-million dollar investment, when they're trying to solve something which is just a subset of all of that.
Right. So we've been having this interesting conversation, and I realize we haven't introduced our wonderful panel, our CEO panel, to the audience. So before we get to tips and advice, perhaps you could each take a moment to introduce yourself. And again, why don't we start with you, Anand?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Mary. My name is Anand Kale. I'm the founder and CEO at Abzen. I founded the company in 2013. So for the last 9 years, we have been the forefront of building AI-first applications in the finance areas. I'm very proud to say that we've ground up, looked for solutions that we could solve for. And today we have close to 1,000 companies, including a third of Fortune 500 companies, that work with us on automating on the spend side of things. When I say spend side, it means everything around accounts payable invoices, credit card transactions, P-card transactions, as well as expenses, right? T&E expenses. That's where our forte is. And really happy about the innovation that we have done and being able to, talk about that to your audience here, Mary.
And Mr. Radford?
Jamie Radford. I am the founder and CEO, similar to Anand, founder and CEO of the Accounts Payable Association. I have the best job in the world. Other than Mary, I have the best job in the world. I get to speak to hundreds and thousands of AP professionals throughout the world about things that affect our industry. I have the pleasure of working with the lovely Mary on many, many projects. And you know what, we're very focused in the UK and Europe, but we do dip our toes over when we work with Mary into North America, into the States. So I have the best job in the world. Mary, come on. You always ask us to introduce ourselves. For the audience, the people who may be watching today.
Oh, they know me. They're so tired of hearing about me. I'm Mary Schaefer from AP now.
I'm not letting you off the hook. Who are you, Mary? Come on, tell the audience.
And I read, write, speak, anything you can possibly do about accounts payable issues. And like Jamie said, I would argue with him, I have the best job in the world. Because one of the things that I really appreciate is we also, and I think Jamie will agree with me, we have the best audience in the world. And that's what makes what we do actually fun sometimes. Dare I say that? Absolutely. All right. Now, speaking of fun, back to invoice automation. Now, one of the issues that I run into, and I think, Jamie, you run into when you talk to people, is the alarming, if I would say, lack of utilization for some of the automation solutions that are purchased. It's less than what you would expect. I mean, I guess I would, and this might be naive, have expected if you buy something today, you'll have 99% utilization in a few months, and that does not seem to be happening. Why do you think this is causing this, and what can be done about it? I'll throw my 2 cents in real quickly. I think there are many factors, but 3 of which can be dealt with: vendor reluctance, AP staff reluctance, and sometimes the need to push vendors outside their normal routine. And Matt, you probably see this firsthand.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on its head, Mary, when you said that vendor reluctance, right? There are two sides to this coin on making this process work is the vendor and the AP person. The vendor is going to do the thing that's the easiest for them. They're not going to incur cost on sending you doing business with in a very different way, unless there's a very big financial incentive.
Right.
The AP person at the same time wants to do the work that's most efficient, right? They want to do the work as efficiently as possible, and they want to save their time. So if this process, whatever tool you have put in, process you have put in, is actually adding to their work, they're not going to do it, right? So understanding that those are very simple things, right? So when I look at suppliers, why are they reluctant? Like you said, you changed their process. You actually introduced friction in the process of doing business with your company. You ask them to probably submit it through some kind of a portal, log in out there, submit it in a different format. Sometimes maybe incur cost in doing that, so on and so forth. And they're not ready to do it, right? Because you're not the only company asking them. There are thousands of other
Right.
companies trying to do the same thing with them, and it simply doesn't work. It works if you have a very high volume, maybe, of invoices that are coming from them, that they will do it for you, but not in most cases. The second is, when I look at it, is from the AP side. What is the goal of the AP person? What was promised to you was this is automation. So when I think about automation, I think about, hey, my car is an automatic. I don't have to change the gears, right? So simply it changes on its own. And if my automatic car behaved, that I could have to make sure that the gear actually changed. You're asking me to double check everything. And the invoice automation system, if I kind of draw the analogy today, they are rules based, they are template driven, they are OCR. They're saying, and the OCRs kind of go all the way. I'm 90% accurate. I'm 60% accurate, 80% accurate. The problem is you don't know when you're not accurate, when you're wrong, right? And the OCRs don't know that, because they are just simply telling you that, hey, I got this. So if you have to put your time in reviewing all of the work that is being done, if the rules are fired correctly, right? If the template has worked as it is supposed to be, and the invoice format has not been changed by the supplier, if the accounting rules are fired correctly, you are actually adding more work to my process, right? And if it's not automating it, if I have to spend time doing it, I might as well do it, do this whole thing, hold the process myself, right? So that's, I think, the friction, the wrong expectations we put on the AP side, which doesn't really pan out into making them more efficient, is one aspect of it. And the second aspect is absolutely the suppliers whom we are creating friction. So if you solve both of them, if you put your process, invoice automation process, in the natural flow of how suppliers want to work with you, right? Without training them, without changing the process, you would take care of that side of the friction, right? You would eliminate that friction. Suppliers are saying, okay, you are just processing it, and wow, I got paid on time, great, right? I got the response back on time, great, right? And from the AP team, you're saying that, hey, I can guarantee you that this invoice got processed without any review, without any, we call it touchless. And touchless also, people look at it differently. Touchless doesn't mean just not touching it physically. Touchless also means not reviewing it, right? You should not put any eyes on it. If you have to put eyes on it and check it, it's not touchless, right? So if I have to do all of that, right? If you eliminate that work, then absolutely I'm going to use it. That's going to make me more efficient, and I know that it is going to be completely compliant, accurate when I process those invoices.
Okay. Jamie, do you see the same thing in the UK?
Yeah, we do, and again, I agree with your 3 points, Mary. I think it's the vendor reluctance, it's the staff can be a bit reluctant, and then obviously vendors going outside the normal, if you like. But I want to give you another three, and I think it comes down to these three things. It's firstly planning. What are you planning to do? What are you trying to achieve? What is it you're trying to do before you even engage with an automation provider? Then it's communication. It all comes down to communication. Communicate with your staff, communicate with the vendor community, communicate with your stakeholders. And then thirdly, it's the expectation. What is it you're going to try and achieve? If you're going to try and eat the elephant and solve, world hunger and world peace, then guess what? It's not going to work. So effectively, those three-stage approach, it goes back to the planning. Do you understand your current processes? does a solution that you're looking to buy fix or assist in that process? Are you communicating correctly with everybody that's involved, including your vendors? And then just set realistic expectation. If you can do those three things, then guess what? You've got at least half a chance of winning. And then the rest of it comes down to training people and actually then working hard to make those things come about.
I can remember being at a credit conference where I was invited to speak and talking about this. And afterwards, one of the women came up to me and she literally screamed at me, I have 6,000 customers. Do you expect me to go into 6,000 portals? And you know what? She had a point.
It's true.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the solutions, and obviously it's a simple solution, it won't solve all the problems, but I think it will go a long way, is how important do you think it is for the ability for an automation solution to be able to read an invoice from an email without requiring the supplier to do anything different? And I'm guessing you're
Yeah, you're asking me questions which are close to my heart, so obviously I can't wait to answer them. But it comes back to the basics. We talked about previously reducing the friction, and if I look at what the actual process is for an AP person, if your majority of your invoices come through email, which is how most invoices come in, right? You should be able to read them. Now, invoices, there are a lot of things that come through email. There are invoices that come through email. There are forms that come through email. There are inquiries that come through email, right? And if my job is to go and filter through all of those, understand what's an invoice, what's an attachment, download it, upload it, and then process the invoice, and then make sure that my automation tool got it right, extracted right, correctly, right? It's just work for me, right? So from my point of view, if I'm looking at invoice automation, it has to be holistic. It means it's got to do everything that needs to happen in the life cycle of processing an invoice. From the time I receive it through email to the time I read it and understand it. I understand, yeah, this is an invoice. Oh, what my business policy is. Should it have a PO? Should it not? Or maybe the invoice doesn't have a PO, but based on the amount and historically the knowledge that I have, this has to be matched to a PO. One, or maybe this is not an invoice match PO, but looking at reading and understanding that invoice, oh, I figure out this is my laptops that I'm buying, and it is being shipped to my address in Atlanta, right? It has to go to the south, my department code south. So all this knowledge that happens, right? And then I enter it, I route it to the correct person, and that's how I process the invoice. So if I have to think of invoice automation, it requires me to read the email. It requires me to read the invoice, understand the invoice, apply my domain knowledge about AP, my chart of accounts, my routing, my policy, and then enter the invoice accurately, and then process it all the way to getting the right person. For me, all these processes have to be automated by the invoice automation tool. You cannot have a bot doing one piece of it, somebody else applying a template for invoice, and then not handling the remaining invoices. And that's what I think about AI. When I talked about AI is understanding language, understanding an image, right? Just like a human would. So it's not about OCR. That thing is decades old. It's about understanding it. If your AI can do it, this process gets automated from reading an email, extracting the information of that invoice, entering it accurately, making sure it goes to the right department, right account code, understanding what a marketing expense is versus an IT expense versus a cost of goods sold. All that deep domain knowledge that an AP person actually has gets transferred from that AI and automates the processing of that invoice.
Jamie, do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not going to say no, are you?
No, look, we've got an absolute expert here, Mary. So I'm hardly going to challenge. But again, what I will add to that is that I'm a big advocate of networking, putting the message of accounts payable out there, and using tools such as LinkedIn. People often use tools such as LinkedIn in all the wrong ways because they assume that LinkedIn is just outreach, send your message out. It's the same when you run an automation project. If you didn't have automation and you just had people and paper, would you say to somebody, only process the perfect invoices and all the rest, throw in a bin or put in a drawer? you would have a solution that dealt with every single invoice that came through the door. So the idea of having an automation solution that can't deal with emails or can't deal with certain types of email formats is beyond me. If you're going to go and run a project, do it for all. Don't do it for a select group. Don't do it by the ones that it can handle. So in the old days when it was just all template driven, that was a challenge because you had to keep re-educating the templates and all this good stuff. So all the new technologies coming through, but going back to the point we mentioned earlier in the session, go and buy the right process design, look at what you're trying to fix and buy the right solution. Go and choose the solution that fits your business and your outputs, rather than have somebody sell you something that ultimately might not fix the problem. And actually, talking about your problem earlier about the user adoption, Mary, that goes back to that point, doesn't it? If a solution isn't fit for purpose, guess what? People are just not going to use it. Your supplier's not going to use it, and your staff are not going to use it. So going back to basics, make sure it does everything you expect it to, and actually, you should expect it to do everything and a little more. The roadmap for your providers, the solution providers, your automation providers, you should be assisting in that roadmap of what future-proof things you wanted to achieve as you go through your journey, your automation journey.
All right. So now I don't have invoice automation, and I'm getting ready to start a project, and I'm looking at people. What piece of advice would you give them getting started? Blank slate, so you can get the person started on the right path. And why don't we let Jamie start, and then you can. I'm sure you have some really great advice, Anand. Jamie, what would you do if you were just getting started?
Do you know what? I go back to my 3 points earlier, Mary. I think it's all about planning. I think far too often, you talk to a solutions provider, and the first thing they do is they give you some perfect customers to go and talk to. They're perfect solution consultants who've gone through a journey. They're on their website, and don't get me wrong, they've got a good view of what's happened in their world. So firstly, what is it you're trying to achieve? Plan out, process map, make sure you understand your own processes. That's number one. Secondly, then when you come to the next stage, which is, right, okay, what industry I am in, what am I trying to achieve? Who do I want to go and talk to now? So not necessarily the customers that have been put forward from the solution provider, but actually somebody in my industry, somebody that's had similar issues, go talk to them. And also talk to the ones that didn't have a perfect journey, the ones that would probably give you some lessons, some of the things that you may not have even planned for, the time it takes, the people, the resource, and the planning, and all the things there. So that's number one. Number two, communication. Make sure you've got a really strong communication plan. The only way, as humans, we push back on any change. We always do. If you communicate, it makes it a little easier. So tell your teams, tell your business, tell your suppliers of what the plan is. So what are you trying to work towards? And then the last thing, really, in a good projects or automation projects, have realistic expectations of what you're trying to achieve. And if it is a phased approach, phase it, but make sure that every time you get to phase one and it's achieved, celebrate the success of each level of the project, and then people will come with you to the next level and next level. So that's more of a user journey. I think we'll listen to the expert now, Mary. So that's my view from a user point of view.
Okay, I'm writing down celebrate the successes. I'm really interested. You probably have a very different approach, Anand.
I agree with what Jamie said, right? Of course, like you got to talk to customers, what worked, what didn't work. But I fundamentally come back to what we talked previously, right? Why do these fail? Because it creates too much friction, right? And my role as an AP person is to automate these processes as quickly as possible. I want to get my ROI within 3 months, make sure that in 6 months, maybe 80% of my invoices become touchless, right? Without educating my suppliers. Great, suppliers should feel it that something has happened in your company, changed in your company, rather than
in the real world.
yeah, versus telling them, sending them emails, hey, please change this, please do this, please do that, right? That doesn't work. It's too much change management, it's too much time spent. So when what we talked previously, Mary, my process is I receive invoices through email and I process them all the way, right? If that's my goal in invoice automation, don't believe whatever your vendor says. Don't believe their slides. Ask them to give you an email address. You should be able to forward the invoice. You should let it see by itself without anyone touching it. and go into the tool. The tool should be as easy to use as you. Nobody taught you how to use Facebook or YouTube. The tool
Right.
should be as easy to use as that, right? So my
Good point.
point is very simple. If that's what your process is, your process, which is most likely most companies have, the default process, my invoices are coming by email. They should be automatically read through email. They should be entered. I want to see the accuracy of all the lines entered, and I should know based on my data how my invoices come in, right? What level of touchless processing is going to happen with this invoice automation tool, and put one of the vendors that you're considering through the same paces, right? Ask them to do the same thing. I don't want to see you giving me a demo, a fancy demo, right? And like Jamie said, talk to a customer. Or I don't want you to ask me to give me your invoices and then I'll process them and I'll show it to them. We know how that works, right? You what you can do behind the scenes. Ask them, give me this is what my real life is, right? And you have not done any training, you have not done any of things that sort. I just want to see how it works, and you will see for yourself what is the one. You will differentiate the vendors who really just are saying that they have a tool which is AI driven versus vendors who really have it, right? And are ready to throw their product out there in the wild, right? And once you see that, you will be able to do a very fair comparison between what happens, right? And we have gone through that multiple times over. We let for customers and prospects who want to try our product, we simply tell them, hey, okay, how many invoices you want to process? Great. Here's an email address for you. Throw your invoices. Here's your login. Go and check it out. Right? You put in whatever invoices you want. We will tell you what worked, what didn't work, and what kind of training the machine has to go through. And secondly, we all talk about AI, and we say it learns. Make sure that it learns, and the only way it can learn is if you train it, and that should be a separate process. So it's interesting that you talked about Amazon or you talked about Netflix initially, right, Mary? That
Yeah.
you didn't train it, your actions trained it by itself. So for example, when in Google, when somebody puts in AP Technology Week, right,
Right.
and a bunch of results come in, and you click on a result, Google knows that you clicked on it and you spend some time on it, so it's automatically learning. This AI is learning that this is the right result, and it's going to move it up into the search results, right? So
Hmm.
you are training the AI that this is what I really it talks to me, that this is the result that I want. Similarly, if I look back to AP, if I get an invoice in and maybe the invoice is not accurately extracted or coded, I should be able to change it, save it, because that's my normal way I work. And maybe once I process three invoices similarly, the system should learn by itself, right? If your AI is really working, the system should learn by itself without me doing anything, right? Or my format changes, system should learn by itself. So those are ways you can really separate out the marketing slides that you're going to see around AI and invoice automation versus whether it is working on your data or not, right? So I strongly urge everyone. There is too much, slideware out there, marketing out there around invoice automation. Just work with somebody, do a trial. It doesn't take more than a couple of hours your time sending emails. When I say send emails, customers simply forward their emails that they've got from their vendors, right? Because that's how I get my emails, and lets it see
Hmm.
process, and then they test you on training. Okay, did I do it three times and it learned on its own? I know this AI really works, right? So those, I would say, do it on your data, look at the outcomes, and then do a comparison between all the vendors.
Is it fair to say or not that if you get a solution that is able to read invoices from email, and you have most of your vendors sending you invoices by email now, that you don't even have to tell them you've made this change?
Absolutely, because the what you see is that they don't know what they're changing. You're not really creating any friction in their process. So there's no question of adoption. There's no question of failure because of adoption, right?
Okay.
That goes away. But in fact, what you see is that the processing time, you're paying them on time. You are taking care of discounts for your company because your processing time reduces to literally minutes, right? From the time an email is sent to the time it is ready to pay, right? Or it is sent for approval, right? And you are seeing a better relationship with the vendor because you're processing the invoices on time. They don't have to follow up on what is the status of my invoices. Did you guys process it? And it's very consistent way of doing things, rather than hoping that, oh, this AP clerk got it, they didn't pay attention, this other one got it, right? As a company, you don't have to worry about churn. You don't have to worry about employees leaving. They had all the knowledge, and now
Right.
this guy's gone. I don't know how do I'm going to process the invoice. I don't have the set of documentation written down, right? So all that goes away because that knowledge, that processing gets transferred from somebody's head onto the machine, and the machine does it by itself.
Good. And so that makes you, you're less dependent on that key employee, especially at a smaller company where that can be a real problem.
Absolutely, because the key around here, how does and I think any of our audience will ask, how will the machine know what my business is? Because what the true AI really does is based on learning. It is not based on rules. So the
Right.
way that knowledge gets transferred is by looking at your data. What any AI system will do is when they connect into your ERP or whatever system you have, they will just look at the invoices. It might be a couple of hundred invoices, right? But they look at your invoices. It will within minutes. They will look how you coded them, how you routed them, how you matched them, and the system, the AI system, should be immediately be able to tell you, hey, I'm good. I learned from your system, from your invoices, the way you have coded it, right? The way you have approved it, or way you have routed it, how you have matched it, how you do your business. That you're actually coding it to this particular account or this particular department or this particular cost center based on certain attributes. Those attributes are not rules. Those attributes are simply what the AI learns based on looking at different sites of invoices. That's kind of the how you transfer that intelligence that the key employee has, the key AP person has, into the machine, and then it doesn't go away.
Perfect. There are 5 sessions in our AP Technology Week programs. We put them all on a playlist. You can watch them now. The link is in the show notes below and on YouTube. Links will appear momentarily. As always, we greatly appreciate your thumbs up, your shares, your comments, and your subscribes. And guys, you were great.